EQ over IQ. If you're not gifted on the IQ side, which, it's a combination of gift and hard work of retention of information, all the things that come with an IQ, but EQ is something you could really cultivate and work hard on. And I think that's becoming just as a desirable skill set, if not maybe even greater in a difficult time, both economically and in the world today, to be able to have those soft skills as a leader.
Welcome to Multifamily Excellence, the podcast that explores the ever-evolving world of the multifamily industry. I'm your host, Jonathan Treble. In each episode, I'll spend time with a world-class multifamily leader to learn how they're continuously pushing boundaries for excellence. You'll get to hear their perspectives on career progression, leadership philosophies, and strategies for operational excellence. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Multifamily Excellence. This episode is brought to you by my company, With Me. With Me makes people's lives better every day through convenient, technology-enabled solutions for the multifamily industry and beyond. Today, I am honored to dive into the insights of Tony Sousa, Vice President of Marketing Relations at RPM Living. Headquartered in Austin, Texas, RPM is the third largest property management company on the NMHC Top 50 list. Tony is known to many as the most interesting man in property management and brings a unique blend of experience to his role, having transitioned from a successful career in TV journalism to operations and marketing leadership in multifamily. In his current role as Vice President of Marketing Relations, Tony serves as lead recruiter, top brand ambassador, and flag bearer for RPM. Tony also serves on the board of directors for the San Antonio Apartment Association, further adding to his influence in the industry. Tony, it's fantastic to have you on the show.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me, Jonathan.
It's a pleasure. And this is the first time I'm having a fellow podcast guest on the show.
Yeah.
So, Tony, you're more experienced than I am at this. So if you need to give me any pointers or want to help me out.
No, it's all good. You did a great job, and this is all fun. And I just love, the fact that you invited me here, and you and your company are doing amazing things. So it's just great to chat with you, collaborate, and I'm sure we'll have a good chat here.
Thanks a lot. And likewise to you, what you're doing at RPM and your company has grown a ton. I'm excited to dive into that with you.
Yeah.
Well, as you know, the premise of our podcast is career growth and leadership. And you bring a really unique story to our listeners about transitioning from a different career into multifamily. And really, I think blending your passion for journalism and your passion for multifamily together in a way that no one has really seen before you in our industry. And I'd love to unpack all of that. So we'll get to more about what you do today. But why don't we take a step back? Let's go all the way back to the start of your career, and let's talk about your first role out of college. I believe it was in journalism. So why don't we start there, Tony? What did you do after college?
Yeah. So in college, fight on. I'm a USC Trojan, and I was a journalist. I was a journalist major, and I thought I was going to be on the TV news. I thought I was going to be anchoring, the evening news. By my age at this time, I was going for Peter Jennings' role, I think at the time, God rest his soul. And so I jumped right into that market. I was putting demo tapes together, working in small markets, up in my hometown market as well. And I lived in Los Angeles. So obviously going to school in Los Angeles, you live in Los Angeles, you have like this much charisma, you get talked into then being an actor. And so, hey man, you got this much charisma, why don't you be an actor? And so I tried my hand at that, spent about 2 or 3 years doing that, learned a lot about myself. There's nothing like walking into a room of producers that cold blank stare at you, and then you read a cold script, emote all of your emotions in front of them, and then they simply end it with "thank you very much," and you walk out. And so you build a lot of callous and courage, and it also comes with a lot of self-doubt and all the other stuff that comes with stuff like that. But you build a lot of strength and courage, and you ultimately just kind of have to ask yourself, is this for you? Is this what you're trying to do? But a lot of those skill sets, both as a broadcaster and as an actor, really serve me today. But ultimately, I had to find a real job, so I thought, and I wasn't sure that acting was going to be what it was. I wasn't certain that it was going to be my career for a combination of reasons. And I applied multiple times. And not a lot of people know that I did not get my first interview or my first job application as a leasing consultant. I think my first interview, they had the doors closed. They forgot about my interview. They were out to lunch, and when I showed up to the office, the doors were closed for a team event, and they forgot about my first interview. And I remember that walk back to my apartment at the time with other fellow actors, and I just thought, they're really missing out on something special. At least I had to tell myself that at that time. And I came back a couple different times and finally got an opportunity with Avalon Bay early in my career, which is obviously a big REIT, great company. And it started from there. And I think a lot of people do know some of my multifamily stories, starting on the leasing floor, learning the fundamentals of sales and leasing and all the things, and then having opportunities to move up and through in a career. I had great leadership at the time. It really, I think, saw something in me that everywhere I went, I made it a little bit better. I don't know about a lot better, but I made it a little bit better. And they put me on different assets and gave me different opportunities, and it just allowed me to learn as much as I could in a very quick amount of time about this business and work on a lot of different asset types and markets in Southern California. And here we are. So going from the leasing floor to VP of Ops and now, a company spokesperson, chief brand ambassador, as I say. It's an exciting career. And I think this industry, although it's not one you typically know that you're going to fall into or you major or you study to be a part of, both on the supplier or operator side. But, as I say, here we are, and we're making quite a career out of it.
Fantastic, Tony. And I want to go through some different stages in your career growth,
Yeah.
so listeners can understand how you learned to be a leader. And I think it's worth noting very early on, I think this was simultaneous to you trying your hand at acting. It looks like you were, according to your LinkedIn, and you can tell us more about it, you were a special education teacher in Los Angeles. And I think that God bless everybody who can do that and has the patience and heart for that. But I think that shows out of the gate you have a big heart, and I'm sure that still brings itself into your work. Anything you want to comment on about that stretch of your career?
Yeah, I appreciate you saying all those nice things. As an actor, you have to have a lot of different jobs, and those who know the arts, you have to maintain a job in the arts sometimes, and audition schedules, you have to have a wide variety of different jobs to pay your rent at the time. And being a teacher, a special education teacher for a time was probably life changing in many ways, and in some ways even in my own life today, full circle. But spending that time in the classroom, and I did some additional teaching outside of a special needs class as well when I was in my early 20s, and that gave me interesting perspective to some of the high school kids I was teaching were only 4 or 5 years younger than me. And so I recall dressing in a suit every day, because I had to elevate a little bit, right? They're like, bro, how are you teaching me? You're like the same age. I'm like, well, I'm a couple of years older and I have a college education, but I know I don't look that much older. Those are great experiences, and I did a lot of different things. I was a limo driver, I was a caterer, I was a waiter, I worked retail, the dreaded gene wall, as they say, all those things, man. So it's really helped me understand, I think to this day, just sort of your common blue collar, hardworking employees, and what means the world to them, what they don't care about, what they do care about, and it helped me just understand just a lot of different jobs and different perspectives, and gave me an array of different skill sets. Obviously, we talked about the broadcast TV one that not everyone has, and that was a unique skill set. But ultimately, I think getting your hands dirty, rolling up your sleeves, and working very sort of commonplace jobs, to me, I look back on very fondly as those are great skill sets that really, I think, today allow me to connect with people at entry level all the way up to executives that I speak with. And that's a cool skill set to be able to do that in a super authentic way. And I just spent some time this week on the ground with teams, and that's probably some of my favorite times, is to hang out with property managers and porters and just talk to them about, this particular one was walking a property on the heels of the hurricane and talking about property damage and some of these other things, and just hearing their stories of hard work and dedication inspires me, as a leader in my current capacity as well.
Oh, was this the most recent hurricane in Texas?
Yeah. So I had a chance to just, on the heels of that, meet some team members and talk with them, and we're doing some internal projects to kind of highlight their hard work and effort and resilience, in the midst of a notable challenge. So, and that's probably the journalist in me coming out, right? That's the Anderson Cooper in me. Truth be told, I did tell my wife, can I go to the hurricane before the hurricane and report live? She said, absolutely not. We have 4 kids and you don't get paid to do that. So, but the journalist in me, I was actually this close to being a meteorologist as well. So I enjoy weather and understanding, weather's impacts, both obviously in the atmosphere, but of course, down here on the ground.
By the way, really cool that you were aspiring to be an anchor for the evening news, Peter Jennings style. I grew up watching Peter Jennings, Charlie
Yeah.
Gibson, others, and I actually got the chance to meet Charlie Gibson in college.
Oh, did you? Yeah.
For a journalism class I took, and he spoke to our small group. I got to walk around campus with him.
That's
What
cool.
a legend! And I was 20 years old. I made some snarky remark about how Penn is better than Princeton, his alma mater. He just stared me down.
He just gave you the dirty look. Well, it's an interesting
Yeah.
story. I think guys like you and I think there's an outside perception that everything they do, is successful or turns to gold, right? They're very, we're successful in our own right in different ways. And I'll use the example. I auditioned many times for my college newscast, and I never was able to make the audition or get the top senior anchor seat there. And it really, I think there was a part of me that was discouraged, but at the same time, I think those things in your life spur sort of a chip on your shoulder. And the reason for that, my reading off a teleprompter was not ideal. My cadence, my breathing, all those sorts of things was not great. My enunciation, articulation of words, I think at the time was not what it needed to be. And so for me, it just challenged me to go back to the lab and get better every day. In that profession at the time, I thought I was going to pursue, so I tried to get better at that. Obviously, I don't do that for a day job now, but I'm still mindful of articulation and communication and breathing cadence and all those sorts of things that probably in this industry, not everybody's thinking about that per se, but that's just a weird background that I have, or a different background.
Well, no, absolutely. I mean, I think it's important to face some challenges earlier in your career to get perspective, right? And I think the one great thing I've noticed from the 6 guests we've had on the show this far, who have all risen to really prominent roles in their companies, often C-suite roles, and in very quick time, is that they really did face adversity early on and overcame it and started at the very bottom of the industry, usually in leasing, which is really interesting, right? But I was having dinner last night with one of my clients who didn't even go to college, but started as a leasing consultant in Dallas and is now the president of a small but growing owner operator. And, I think that's one great thing about our industry is it seems like a meritocracy. If you have the skills, the will to grow, there's virtually no limit you can have.
Yeah, and I think, obviously it's a bit of a hot topic in regards to degree or no degree. Obviously, that's probably a topic for another show. But I think that's also why many in this industry do appreciate this industry, that it is based on your merit and it's based on your hustle and your experience and ultimately your effectiveness, right? I think a lot of people don't talk about that as a leader. How effective are you as a leader? And I probably would argue as a younger leader, as I was at times, to say, well, I don't need 40 years of experience as a leader to be effective. The reality is, obviously, experience is wonderful. So 40 years of experience is wonderful to have, but effectiveness is also key to have. And frankly, that's probably a bit of the sort of leadership art and science of leadership, right? I remember many team members coming to me, running to my office. My teams aren't doing what I tell them to do. I said, well, okay, well, by the nature of your role, they have to, otherwise they're in trouble. But the trick of the trade is to get them to do it willingly and to go above and beyond. And so, how do you go about doing that and building trust and strengthening those relationships to where they want to not only do it for the company's sake or for their sake, but to do it beyond expectation or much better. That is probably the art of leadership. I would probably argue.
Well said. I think effectiveness is very important. It's and I see it on my leadership team. There's a range of aptitude and skill and charisma. At the end of the day, it's how effective are you at leading, managing, recruiting great talent to make the org better. And effectiveness, if you had to sum it up in one word, I think that's probably what we're all looking for, right?
Yeah, I mean, at your level, client owner level, listen, just get the job done, right? Especially in a tough economy and when things are challenging, effectiveness is going to be key. And it's something I plan to sort of talk a little bit more about or have a post about, EQ over IQ, right? I think there's typically, in academia, there's a big focus on IQ, which, listen, intelligent, brilliant people are admirable and incredibly smart and genius in so many ways. And we need them for a lot of reasons. But I think there's many in this business that can continue to not compare themselves. If you're not gifted on the IQ side, which, it's a combination of gift and hard work of retention of information, all the things that come with an IQ, a lot of that, as I've gotten older, I think I've realized there are some DNA gifts there in your ability to have an IQ that can retain information, photographic memories, all those sorts of things. But EQ is something you could really cultivate and work hard on. And I think that's becoming just as a desirable skill set, if not maybe even greater in a difficult time, both economically and in the world today, to be able to have those soft skills as a leader to be able to understand all the things we talked about, your customer, your employees.
That's a great point. And before the show, I commented on the book in your background, Simon
Yeah.
Sinek, Leaders Eat Last.
Yeah.
One of my favorite business books, and I have a copy here in my office. I think that you made a really good point where it's possible to cultivate and learn those skills, even if you may not be a natural at it just early in your career, right? And I'll admit, I was far from natural at EQ leadership early in my career. I'm shameless about it. I was a pretty bad manager, and I had to go to school on that. I had to get my own experience and almost a degree in leadership, and I read everything I could. I joined like a support group for EQ troubled founders, and
That's pretty cool. Yeah,
yeah,
it's
but really,
it's cool that you're so honest, man, about this. This is awesome. I don't want to cut you off. I'm curious of the story.
well, yeah. So I knew I had some issues there. I'm a very left brain person just naturally, and that's what kind of got me through great education and into
Right.
interesting technology roles out of school. And I didn't really appreciate any of the EQ side of business, of managing people, of leading people. It was like tone deaf to me. I was like,
Right. That's the easy
why?
stuff. That's the easy
Yeah,
stuff, right?
right. The soft stuff
You,
that
you
like,
tell them what
hey,
you tell them what to do, and they should do it. Otherwise, they're out of here, right?
exactly, yeah. And that was honestly the way I looked at it until I learned by fire, trying to hire my first few people and
Yeah.
managing them, pretty poorly, that
Retention of
you know,
staff and all of that.
yeah, right. They're pretty low retention, pretty low effectiveness,
Yeah.
right? I wasn't able to effectively grow the business beyond being a one-man show. It's obvious to everybody, but you can't grow a business if you're doing everything yourself, right?
Right. Can't scale it. Yeah.
So, I had to learn, and I tried to learn pretty quickly and tried to learn the skills pretty quickly. And, finally, after a few years of doing that, I got better. And then I've learned even more over the years on how to lean into some of those EQ skills, develop them, and be more of a leader than a manager, and certainly not a micromanager.
Yeah.
But it was not natural for me. And I think you just made a great point, though, that if there are listeners out there who feel the same way,
Yeah.
again, left brain success, you were rewarded for all those analytical skills in your career up to now, and you need to make that transition. It certainly is possible, and it just requires a lot of intentionality, hard work. Coaching can be useful. Reading can certainly be useful. So yeah, I'm glad we can go there and talk about it, because
Yeah.
I think we don't often talk about how to actually cultivate those skills.
Yeah, for sure. I was super inspired by your story. Thanks for sharing that, Jonathan. Yeah. I think the pandemic highlighted a lot of this in a lot of us, that strength of building trust with your teams and how committed are they to the mission, especially when times got real tough and really uncertain. And I think during that time, and I know in our business on the operator side, it was called the Great Resignation, right? And there's a lot of people that moved and left and just dropped keys, as we would say, I'm out of here. I don't need this. And I think a lot of people really sort of evaluated, I'll take less money or I'll take a less stressful job for more of an emotional balance that I can. And so I think it challenged our industry. I think it challenged most industries to take a step back, and challenged leaders specifically to take a step back and say, okay, what environments have I created for my teams to thrive in? And I'm fortunate to be here at RPM that creates really great culture, and it starts at the very top. And Jason's an amazing guy, and really helps with his philosophy of family is family, and work is work, and make sure you're taking care of both. And that's important, to make sure you bring what I would say your whole self to work, right? Like your personal family side, because if that's in dismay, or you're not balancing that, showing up to the office every day, there's going to be some fallout there, and vice versa, right? You don't want to bring all the fallout of office home either. And I'll tell you, like from an EQ standpoint, I'm not sure, if you got any kiddos, but I just had my fourth, and there's something about being married. Yeah, thanks. Being married and having a whole bunch of kids that will just continually remind you that your life is not about you. And I think sometimes as you get older, that's a good perspective, because sometimes I think you can get, I think naturally as a human, you can get caught up in everything is about you and the story is about you, and you have to take a step back and realize it's not. And it's also been helpful for me as a content creator to understand that the content that I create is not for me. Although some of the messages and memes that I maybe create are sort of words that I'm trying to help inspire myself or pick myself up out of something, I've realized, and I think in the position I find myself in, both at RPM and maybe within the industry, is, a level of responsibility of encouraging, inspiring others that may be going through some different things that maybe I've gone through or maybe I haven't. But, if I could be a little bit of a sunshine in their scroll for the day, job well done.
Well said. And speaking of inspiration of others, let's follow your early to mid career in multifamily. And if you could tell us, you don't have to name names or companies, although you may if you'd like. What were the ingredients of your career success? Because you moved through the ranks fairly swiftly over the years, and your resume reads again like one of these high potential, fast growth leaders, starting in leasing, community management, regional management, running, I believe, San Antonio for RPM in operations before moving over to marketing. So how did you learn how to grow as a leader? What are some tactical things? What are some specifics that our listeners might want to key in on so that they can try to replicate that?
I mean, some tactical things, it sounds cliche, but I think having a plan for your career is a good thing. It doesn't always go per plan, and I think you have to allow yourself some flexibility. But, I had target dates of positions and rank and focuses that I wanted to achieve by certain ages. Frankly, looking back on it now, I never achieved those, and I had to be okay with that. So I think that's a tactical, career roadmap practice for people to do, but at the same time, emotionally, talking about EQ, be able to give yourself a little bit of grace if you didn't hit some of those benchmarks. But I think that also allows for you an opportunity to decompress and take a look back and say, was the goal too ambitious, or did I not strive on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis to, achieve what I wanted to? And is that therefore the reason I didn't hit some of these benchmarks, right? Really, I think taking your own career and your own life and dissecting it like a business plan, and, all about that, right? Taking your business plan and really splitting hairs on it and parsing it. And obviously a business plan is incredibly nuanced, but I would also argue that your career business plan is also, there's a lot of details there, and aligning yourself with the right company, aligning yourself with the right leadership. A lot of people do ask, how did you learn about leadership? And we may talk about that a little bit, and maybe that's a segue of sorts, but, and I hear this kind of mantra of, I wish I had a good leader, or I'll get the occasional message, Tony, I would thrive under your leadership. And the reality is, you don't know that. I don't know that. And the reality of this also is you learn a lot from mediocre leadership or poor leadership sometimes, or a bad manager. You learn a lot from that. And I look back on my own career, and you probably think back on yours as well. You learn a lot from some of those folks that you just walk away from the experience saying, I'm going to do it differently. And specifically, this is what I'm going to do in that circumstance when I have an opportunity to lead or oversee something. And so I would just encourage any listeners at any rank and file, that you should be learning through great opportunities, great successful situations, great leaders, but you should be learning just as much, if not more, from adversity and mediocre or bad management, because it's out there. And I tell my kids all the time, and they're in sports, high level sports, they're not always going to have the best coaches. But that should not deter you from being your best self. If you want to make it to the league, right, you're going to have to bob and weave through mediocre coaches your whole career. And frankly, I think in the working world, that's some of our stories. I've been fortunate, probably like you and maybe many others, that I've had great leaders and mentors along the way, but I've also had a lot of mediocre. But I didn't allow for that to hold me back. And I think sometimes individuals can be, I hate to use the term excuse oriented, but to say, well, the reason why I'm not growing is because they're not looking at me in this way, or they're not growing me. At the end of the day, you're responsible for growing you. And you could have the people around you helping you do that, because the reality is what people also don't realize is from executives to managers, they're also going through their own stuff. And life is hard for them, both family wise, business wise, work wise. They're focused on growing a company or maintaining their job or doing a good job. And if they have the bandwidth and they have the EQ, right, they're going to try to help you. But if they don't have the bandwidth, or they're not that high level EQ leader or operator, they're not going to grow you. And you shouldn't just sort of expect them to. Now, if they do, it's a blessing, right? It's awesome. It's helpful. But the reality is, I think that's fewer and far between. I've come to realize over the years, just in other people's stories as well, that just haven't been in great mentorship situations, and that's disappointing. But at the end of the day, you have to continue to surround yourself with people that inspire you and that you want to be more like. And you probably are surrounded by other founders and CEOs that you're inspired by, and probably some that you even mentor, if I was to guess. And so all of that means a lot, I'm sure, to you in your life and your career. But it's the same for even site level or mid level, probably even executives as well. They all have business coaches and life coaches and all those sorts of things. And we understand the means are a little bit different, but I think you could find those people in your life without sometimes paying for them.
Yeah, you absolutely can. I think you're totally right about that. And it sounds like you had some great mentorship along the way. Although a balance, right?
Yeah.
Like you, I also had some supervisors who were not great, and learn from them. But I also have grace for them because
Yeah.
people are often put in tough situations. I think one of those supervisors, looking back now, I know that he wasn't keen to be in that position. He was just asked to by his company, and he's more of an engineer, right? And
Right. Right.
so that happens, right?
I think that happens more often than people realize. I think people are in positions because it's just right time, right place. They're thrust into a situation. You hope that there's some training for them to be good in that role. Sometimes there is, and sometimes there's not. And RPM, we're really looking to focus on leadership training, and we have a lot of internal things that we're doing to help bolster and strengthen our leaders here. I know many companies, good companies, are looking to do that. To me, that feels like one of the biggest gaps in multifamily probably is leadership training, whether it be sort of holistically throughout the industry or individually, companies having those resources to do that. Obviously, bigger companies probably have more financial resources to help with that, or a bigger staff. I think mid-sized to smaller companies have to be a little scrappier and more resourceful and more thoughtful about how they go about building their bench and strengthening their leaders. But ultimately, I think it comes down to prioritizing the importance of that, regardless of the size or scope of your company. So, and that usually stems from the top and leadership focused that has to believe that that's important.
It's a timely topic right now for us too. At With Me, we're now getting to the size where we have few levels of leadership and management. And one question that came up in our offsite this week in Chicago is whether we can put together a formal mentorship program. And so that's something we're now kicking around as an idea. Although I'm not sure how formal we can make something like that, because in my own experience, the mentors that I've had the fortune of having have really come about organically, right? And I think it's a two-way willingness to lean in and coach. But I'd like to help facilitate that, I suppose.
Yeah.
Have you found any, whether it's an RPM or whether it was earlier in your career, what advice would you have to folks that are looking for mentorship?
Yeah, I mean, I think seek and you will find, right? In the most simplest of ways. And I sense that's probably been your experience, is that you knew you were in a situation in maybe either your personal or professional life that you needed to find those people that you admired, or that could speak into your life or help you, because you knew you had potential, but you also probably knew you didn't have the skill set to scale or get to where you wanted to go. And so you have that, that maturity and know-how. And I think there's a lot of people that are feeling that way. And I know because they send me a lot of messages, and specifically the messages that they'll send me on occasion is, Tony, can you be my mentor? And if you can't, do you know of anybody that can, right? And I think I talked to some people, and sure, that could be like, you could be kind of sad for that message, right? To say, man, these poor folks like don't have anyone in their organization or anyone in their circle, and so they're reaching out to a guy like me who maybe they're connected to, but we're not really connected, right? And that's just sort of the atmosphere of social media. Believe me, I'm wildly humbled by anyone thinking that I could be their mentor to this day, although I do mentor many, but I also have mentors. And so I think my message to anyone that is looking for a mentor is don't be afraid to ask. So I have no problems, on the heels of this, shoot me that DM and say, can you? The likelihood of me being able to be that for so many is unlikely because of 4 kids and a busy day job, right? But can I help facilitate, that for you in some ways? There's other networks that are out there, the Multifamily Mentorship Program, but shoot your shot, as they say. I mean, feel free to reach out to people in your circle, outside of your circle. And if anything, can I just meet with you for coffee, buy your coffee, and make sure you show up on time and you're early, right? Those are the little things. And I've had some conversations with individuals that didn't probably buy my coffee, not that you have to, but also showed up late, right? And so that's a first sort of misstep as well. So just, being mindful of people's time and respectful of the time, especially if you're asking, quote unquote, something of them, which is essentially their experience and wisdom. If you're going to be asking that of them, because that's been hard earned, right? It's been earned through, sure, there's an academic financial cost maybe, but really it's been through blood, sweat, and tears of learning things the hard way and making mistakes at every turn, to now, after maybe a decade or two, you start to figure out, maybe I know what I'm doing, and then you realize after the next big mistake, maybe I don't know what I'm doing. So we're all kind of in this journey together.
Well said. And I think it's great that we're even talking about the basics, right? Like, yeah, buy somebody's coffee, show up on time. We've had thousands of downloads now, and I know that there's a wide range of listeners listening. So early career folks need to hear this.
Not that you're in the coffee
right?
business, but you kind of are in the coffee business too, right? So there you go.
Right. There you go. Buy the coffee. Yeah, I love it. But
Sit with me.
another thing I like to remind people, and I get asked sometimes, how do I find a mentor, right? And I also get asked, hey, how do I maybe break into this other organization? I'd love to work at this company, and they haven't responded to my resume drop. Everyone underestimates the power of a cold message, a cold email, a cold LinkedIn request with a thoughtful statement in that message, right? And
Yeah.
this might be surprising to folks. I very seldomly get a really thoughtful cold message in my inbox asking me for a favor, asking me for a job. I get a lot of cookie cutter copy and paste messages. I can't tell you how many. I get them every day, and I'm sure
Right.
you do too.
Right.
But a thoughtful message that really shows you've researched that company, that person, shows the why behind your message more than just a blanket approach, that can go a long way. I've hired people that way, right? And I've even gotten an investor, a significant investor, through a cold email where I showed that I actually researched the investor, and so never underestimate that. And I think a lot of folks are hesitant to do that, but again, shoot your shot, right? There's no downside to trying that, and I think that's often overlooked.
I think I love the point that you make, and I, like you, live a similar life, right? Where you get a lot of messages and they feel very sort of canned and generic. I've had to kind of think about this a little bit too, and think, why would you not authentically approach somebody in a way with a thoughtful message, or some of the things that you said? And I've come to realize, I think there's a level of probably fear or insecurity about rejection, and frankly, I think people have a lot of emotional guards up too, to be too probably vulnerable or authentic in their message. And so it's easier just to kind of paste and copy what I send to everyone, shoot your shot. But ultimately it's a volume play. And I think that's, listen, I love my sales folks, but I think that volume book there's some generations to that. And some of that I feel is an older perspective, that versus an authentic relationship build or an authentic note, to your point, is going to serve them very well. Sure, in combination with volume, not that I'm on the sales side, right? I'm not a sales leader, but I think, finding that combination of consistency, volume, but also authenticity is going to land you, the best probability of getting what you want, or at least a conversation.
Well said. Yeah. You definitely have to put yourself out there and be vulnerable to personalize and make it heartfelt. One other thing I'll suggest to listeners, maybe don't approach those early LinkedIn requests or emails with the specific title of mentorship. I think that can maybe set the
That
stage for
builds. That
something
builds.
that might be a little forward, a little too much for the initial contact, but a more simple message of, hey, I noticed you're really successful at XYZ company. I'm newer to the industry. I'd love to maybe pick your brain or get some
Yeah.
advice about growth in the industry. Could I buy you coffee sometime? Just keep it kind of low stakes. And if there is a nice connection at that coffee, it's likely going to be the case that that person will make themselves available to continue to meet.
Yeah.
And whether you want to call it mentorship or not, it'll maybe go in that direction. So I think
Yeah.
like,
And
again,
what is
yeah,
what
right.
is mentorship, right? It's just ongoing conversations and being able to have an authentic dialogue with somebody you trust and respect, and tell them about your life or your profession. I mean, that in essence is mentorship. And you're right. I mean, it's, the big M word, right? Can scare. It's like, from mentorship to marrying somebody on a first date, right? Like, it can scare the other person pretty quickly.
Right.
Buy me dinner first, right? As they say.
Yeah.
So, it's, or buy me a coffee, right? And so I agree with you. I think there's different ways to build that incrementally, and which feels probably more healthy and natural, frankly.
Right. All right. Well, let's continue. So I
Yeah.
know we want to get to your current role because it is so unique and it's a wonderful blend. Anything else that you learned as you went from the regional level to leading all of San Antonio operations? You know, leveling up from a manager to a leader, I think is an important step that not many people talk about. And we talked about this on our offsite this week. We have several great managers in the company. Finding leadership is a little bit more rare, right? So it seems to me you are a great leader in everything I can read about you online and your podcast. So how did you learn to go take that step?
Yeah, I think it comes down to use a term of my friend Moshe Crane. I think it's curiosity, right? As you grow as a leader, you want to continue to learn more about what leadership is, what it means, how you can be most impactful. And I think most people that are thrust into promotions or leadership opportunities, you and I could probably attest to this. Oftentimes, and I tell a lot of people in my career, most of the positions that I was promoted into or given the opportunity to be a part of, I never did that role before. So a lot of my career, as you mentioned, and I'm sure with yours and many listening, sometimes if you're technically lucky, it's going upwards. And so what a lot of people don't realize is when that's happening, you're often in a position you've never been in before. And so I think a lot of people assume people that are in new positions like, oh, you were just built for that or you were made for that. The reality is often not. You've never been in this position before. You're fighting feelings of that imposter syndrome. You're fighting feelings of, am I in over my britches? Am I, what am I doing here? And am I being effective? And I remember the first time I went from a property manager to a regional manager, I told my wife, I said, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not on site anymore. I'm not getting leases. I'm not closing deals. I'm not handling resident issues. I'm in meetings all the time. And so it just took some time and patience and trust, and also aligning myself with other regional managers at the time to say, how are you most effective in your job? And I would take copious notes and learn from them. And ultimately, I then had to trust my gut and intuition as a leader to say, I think these are great notes and I learned a lot from my peers, but I think this is also where I can be greatly effective. And that's to be high level on the business, but also as supportive as I can in the details in the day to day. And ultimately, some of the best leaders do that job the best, right? They're, able to focus on a high level of like where this ship, the Titanic, or whatever sort of vehicle that you want to say you're guiding, where are we going? What are the trends ahead? What are the impasses ahead? Where are their opportunities? But ultimately, at the same time, spending the time to build relationships and understand the nuances of their people in the organization, the culture, the true culture, and sometimes as a leader, getting feedback from your employees or getting them, and you could probably attest to this, getting some surveys internally. It stings a little bit to get some of that feedback because in your mind, A, that's not your intention, and B, that's not what you want it to be. And to hear that people's experiences are not exactly what you were hoping them to be is good for leaders to hear often, because it humbles you, but it also helps realign you, I think, as a leader, to say, okay, I thought we were going here, but my sense is the organization or my team feels like we're going here, and I need to figure out how to bridge that. And I need to probably challenge myself as a leader to be a better communicator and also a better visionary. And so for me, that's a lot of what I did at every level. I just was curious, and I wanted to be a better professional and a better leader. And I took great pride in that responsibility in every role. And I was always willing to take some of the harshest feedback from my team. As uncomfortable as it was probably some of the best conversations I've ever had.
Interesting stuff. And Moshe Crane, to mention him again,
Yeah.
he's branded himself the most curious person in multifamily.
Yeah.
Which,
Yeah.
I agree with you. Curiosity is important for leadership. I'm sure your bookshelf is filled with many more leadership books than just that Simon Sinek book. So, there's many ways to learn it, and if you practice it, I think it can come. Let's round out the show talking about your current role. So I'm so curious. I haven't found another role like yours in the industry. So tell us how you got into it, and then we'll talk about how it's going, what your objectives are, maybe any ways you can measure the impact.
Yeah. So it's a unique role. I'm hyper aware of that. Last year, about this time, I got a call from a high-ranking colleague here at RPM, and they said, "Hey, we're thinking about something. We think you have the skill set, both as 20 years ops, but also an ability to connect on a different level and connect in scale. You've obviously worked very hard to grow a community online, but also in real life. And would you think about doing this full time and supporting teams internally and being a lightning rod of positive attention externally? And we're going to figure it out as we go. And there's no other job that we're aware of in the industry that is this, but we think you have a very unique skill set based on your background, but based on your experience, that we'd love for you to consider this." And the funny story is, I had a July 4th vacation scheduled last year to go to California and see my family. And I took that time to talk with my family and my wife. And I don't know if I've even told some internal RPM colleagues this. At first, I wasn't sure if they were just trying to send me low-key messages that you're doing a mediocre job at your ops job, that this is an easy off-ramp for him to do something else. And obviously later it came to find out that that didn't have anything to do with that. They just thought, ultimately, take that skill set and then take this job description that we've created, and that's how it got kickstarted. I feel like I've been in this role for 10 years. I think I have my year anniversary coming up in this role. Wow. And so that's that, and I've been able to do so much in this role and learn so much and work with so many amazing people. And so really from day one, really right away, and a lot of people ask, how was that transition? Because I was on asset calls and working with clients and operators on a daily basis, and then I was just thrust into PR social meetings and messaging meetings. And
Right.
and I don't claim to my marketing team at all, although I'm in the marketing department and I have marketing in my title, to be a marketer. That's for them. They're amazing at that. That's an expertise that I commend them for. But I think if there's anything that I do bring to the table is the ability to connect and build community and inspire, and also hopefully mostly bring positive attention to the brand and to the company. We do a lot of stuff internally. Talk to you a little bit about that. A lot of internal, non-public facing messaging, work with the comms team, communications team internally, helping support that initiative in a lot of ways. So we have a lot of internal communication and leadership training and other things that happen internally, a lot of workshops to try to bring leadership education and even online brand ambassadorship education to our team. And hopefully you've noticed, I like to say, sleeper cells throughout the country of RPM associates that are building their own sort of influence in their markets to recruit and attract clients as we grow in certain markets as well. So that's some of the organic stuff that we're working on that isn't always so public. Obviously, there's a strategy behind it, and we're strategic in how we build out and support other ambassadors within the company, me being probably the senior most highly public ones. And probably don't have time to sort of unpack sort of the intensity or responsibility of being this public at times. So So I understand that. But ultimately, I think from a metric standpoint, we look at a lot of different things. Obviously, brand awareness numbers, engagement, talent or recruiting, bringing clients into new markets and establishing conversations there. I think in a lot of ways, me and executive team can be an entry point of communication that we then can lead them to other discussions with other support departments along the way. And so, yeah, so we look at a lot of that data internally and try to evaluate that. And then, of course, strategically make adjustments based on what's working or maybe, what's falling short of making an impact. So it's a very fluid role, as you could probably imagine, but it's a pretty exciting one. And I didn't realize I probably have more entrepreneurial spirit than I realized I did. And I think in a role like this, it challenges you to be that entrepreneur in some ways, to think, okay, what are we doing now, and what do we need to be doing for the future? In a lot of ways, as an operator, I always thought that way, but this is definitely a role that has challenged me and all of our team to say, okay, where are we going with this, and how are we going to make the greatest and biggest impact we possibly can for our company, and how do we align corporate brand and personal brand? Because I think for some time, there was, I think, and I hope to have helped reduce some of that tension between a personal brand and a corporate brand, that actually, if it's strategic, you can align them very well. And then frankly, it could be very impactful. So I think RPM and myself have a lot of ambition to help define that.
Great. And I know one of your objectives is recruiting. You say you're a top recruiter, which is so important. And I'm sure we're all facing it, right? It's a hard market to recruit great talent. How can you share anything about how that's come to bear with your role?
Yeah, so I mean, we have internal tracking links and other things like that we take a look at and find ways to be able to sort of track messaging, what ads are more effective than not. I mean, just like any other company like yours and others, right? Like, does this graphic work? Does Tony, out in front, I posted something about a Chicago opening, right? Throw a Bulls jersey on and engage the camera, right? Does that disrupt a scroll and ultimately have people either share that with somebody else or engage, with that content? So we take a look at that and try to evaluate that internally. The best part about, my team is they're super supportive of me, and in some ways, like, Tony's a unique cat, let Tony do Tony, and we trust, we trust the creative there. But ultimately, we circle back and use the data to inform our decisions on the creative. And I think those in the creative content marketing space understand how important that data is in forecasting future creative and future ad spend and other things like that, just as you would conventionally as a marketer as well. So it's just a different way that I think people are engaging today, and it's largely through content or video or pictorial content. And so we're just trying to leverage the new marketplace today and just remain as relevant as we possibly can, just like every other company.
Have you done any short form video?
Man, well, I was going to commend you. You guys have done some really cool documentary short form vid stuff. We have done mostly internal stuff. So I've done quite a bit of stuff, obviously with a background as an actor, it's been fun to be able to do that. So yeah, we've done some internal stuff like RPM1, a big conference we have. We've done some other segments internally, not as much public facing, but I've seen some of the commercials you guys are working on, man. It's, that's great stuff, man. Really creative.
Cool. And that's all kudos to my marketing department. I didn't have anything to do with it, so I'm proud of that. There's some creative folks there, and we just talked about our ambitions for next year, and it's going to include even more video. Because
I just
that's where people are, right?
Yeah, I mean, just on air, I want to commend you and your team. I'll tell you, just from afar, it's been cool to see your brand grow, and you as a leader being willing to, and I don't know if creative is your strength, but being able to understand today's economy and lean into the creative side of the marketing side. And I think, I'm sure as you guys evaluate some of the data points, see that there's good engagement there. And also there's a level of consistency and trust in understanding where the marketplace is going with content marketing. And I know you as a leader probably see that and evaluate that. And so it's been cool to see the brand grow and be more engaging. So kudos to you and your creative team. It's been fun for us on the outside to watch you guys grow in that way.
I really appreciate that. I'm sure they all do as well. So
send them that clip.
Yeah, I will. We're gonna publicize that clip.
That's the one we're going with.
Tony, it was a real pleasure having you on the show. Thank you for sharing your story, your advice, and your insights to the audience. If folks want to get in touch with you, I think they know how to find you, but what's the best way to get in touch with Tony that will maybe stand out a bit?
Well, I'll say, as much as you and I get a lot of messages every day, the ones that still stand out are the most thoughtful messages. And so, Yeah, LinkedIn continues to be probably the most public way to engage with me. I think if I take pride in anything is my ability to be responsive as almost in real time, which is probably a double-edged sword for me that, personal life, probably you don't need to be as responsive, but it's just sort of a natural habit for me. But yeah, LinkedIn probably publicly is the best way.
All right. Well, Tony, thank you again. Have a great rest of your day and weekend ahead. And I look forward to having you on the show some years from now. You can tell us even more how things are going.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Multifamily Excellence, brought to you by With Me. With Me is making lives better every day through convenient, technology-enabled amenities for the multifamily industry and beyond. If you like this episode, make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.